I have to say that I find it utterly wrong, unjustifiable, that this particular directive was passed in Europe on the 5th of the 12th, 2011, and we're now in 2021. 10 years later, having been prodded by the European Commission by way of referring Ireland to the European Court for not implementing this directive. And I cannot understand the reason or the logic of our representatives going over to the European Union, agreeing directives, if they have no intention of implementing them again. Maybe we agree to too many directives. But if you do agree, you should then follow the letter of the law. And I am particularly hard where the state doesn't follow the law. We expect citizens to follow the law. We bring them to court for not following the law. And it's totally unjustifiable when the state itself doesn't comply with its legal obligations. And I've seen and heard no justification. Now, we do know there was previous legislation, and I'll come to that in more detail. But we also know, because of various court cases and so on, very few people were going to get transferred. Now, it is important to note that there are 1,100 Irish people imprisoned abroad in 30 countries. However, one country dominates above all else, and that is our nearest neighbour, the United Kingdom. And after all the years waiting, as this bill is published, the reality is that it doesn't cover the United Kingdom, which is no longer a member of the European Union. Now, I do understand there has been a commitment made to introduce amendments at committee stage. I find that unacceptable as a practice, because there was 10 years to get this right. There was 3 years to deal with the Brexit issue. And in the 25 years since this legislation came in, 459 of the applications out of a total of 563 came from prisoners in the UK. And Minister, I therefore have to say that we would want to be absolutely cast iron guaranteed that we will see these amendments and that we'll see them at committee stage and not at report stage. And another question that you might clarify in this regard: since jurisdictionally Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, will people serving sentences in the North be able to apply for transfer to serve their sentences down here? Because I know a number of people who are desirous of doing so and who are Irish citizens. And will that apply to all Irish citizens, irrespective of where they're from on the island? Now, I've heard a lot about prisoners, and there are various types of prisoners, and the more you go into prisons, you see that prisoners are as varied as society is. Yes, you've got the huge drug barons who are multinational operations going. I'd say if you did a census of the prison population, you'd find that they're actually a small minority. You have prisoners in for all sorts of reasons. You have some prisoners there for something that was wrong, that was obviously caused a conviction, but where reoffending is unlikely. But there's one thing I'm certain of, and that is that all prisoners that are entitled to human rights, good prison treatment, but also we know that the better the system, the better the treatment, the better the support in the prisons, the more likely it is that when people come out, they'll reintegrate peacefully into society. And we have to understand the rationale for this is humanitarian and rehabilitative. And one thing that always strikes me dealing with prisoners is, first of all, the huge burden put on families, parents, partners, spouses, children. And I see this all the time. And I have to say that another thing I find very, very edifying is the huge effort that families make, many times travelling long distances, even within the country, to go on visits, some of which can be quite short. And therefore, never forget when somebody gets sentenced to prison, in virtually all cases, it also has a huge effect on family members. And that we rely more than we do on the prison system in a strange way. And even people involved in the prison system have said this to me, that people in a stable relationship, for example, are much less likely to reoffend than those who aren't. And therefore, we're actually relying hugely on these family members as part of the rehabilitative process. And therefore, if you have family members serving prison sentences abroad, you can imagine the cost and the burden on the family members who have committed no crime, are guilty of nothing, in trying to visit people in their own families. According to the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, all things being equal, sentenced persons who serve their sentences in their home countries can be rehabilitated, re-socialised and reintegrated into the community better than elsewhere. So the objective evidence is that giving people this option is a good idea. Finally, Minister, I understand in this bill that there's a new principle, and that is part of the directive, and that is that people can be sent home against their will. I have to say that I did favour the old arrangement where you couldn't be transferred against your will, and it's something I'll certainly be following up again at later stages of this bill.